stage is fine, but I need to know if the other two are okay. So there's one
Clamber about.
stand up towards the right on the floor.
Clamber about. Trusty. Hello. Okay, the one on this end or this end?
Can I call you back at 2:30? Okay. Sorry.
So you'll read Spanish and
Okay.
English?
Testing. Blah 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 blah. Blah blah
Pick
blah.
up the mic. I'm sorry. Question?
You're gonna read what? What are you gonna read?
What is your question?
I don't know if I'm going to
Hello.
but if possible, I might read
La da 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 da. Do 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 do. Chick up, crickets, crickets.
Yeah.
Put my stuff here.
Is this okay? Should I blow my nose?
Did somebody like, are these pads for like special people who get to sit on a padded seat?
They're essentially to keep your butt from falling asleep. And all people are special.
Turn my phone off.
If you need it.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Come on.
It always, you know, and it's usually
Are you
just.
gonna read it in Spanish?
I'm not sure I'm going to read it at all.
Okay, so that mic's live. Now let's see if that
Tangentially,
stereo mic
it's
at the end of
related
the
to
bookcase
recording.
right in front of you. No, on the floor. Right there. So let's see if that button.
Hello, 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 hello.
So we're ready
I didn't know about this.
to go ahead, really.
Because your work is up, everybody,
So,
Oh, yeah, I probably did know. Where is it again?
it's Arian Press.
would you start or would you rather?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. I'll go live when the stream,
I'll just help you
Okay.
with this.
and I'll be back there. I don't think I'll make an announcement.
It's
Okay.
really
Okay. Let me get this out of the way.
I'll tell you.
Okay, so I'll give you the sign to start, and once you're situated, feel free to take your time
Okay.
getting ready. Okay, Janet.
You can hold on to me.
I'll hold on to
Oh,
that.
okay,
Unless it comes down on me.
okay.
Yeah, well, it's just thank you very much. Okay, see you later. Okay. So once you're settled, let me know.
Do you want to take your heavy
Okay,
jacket?
I'm settled.
You're good?
Do you want to take
Yeah.
your jacket off?
Okay.
Yeah. What? One second.
Hold on a second. We have something
There you go.
through the house.
You can give it to me.
Plug this in. Okay, say a few words just to the people in front of you. I can check the levels here.
Okay.
Talk to the folks.
I want to thank everybody for coming. Is that good enough?
Well, I'm trying to check the other mics.
Okay.
So,
Sounds good to me.
keep talking.
It's funny to tell a poet to keep talking because.
I know what? I think we're ready to go.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to take the card down so they can see you, and then in a second I will give you a sign here. We do need more light on
Can you give me a shout instead of
Shout,
it's
yes, a shout and sign. We're going to get some more light on this before we start because it's quite dark there. So that just takes swiveling a lamp up there. Excuse me, Andrew.
Sure.
I'm just going to redirect the light.
Thank you.
It's a little brighter. Don't stare into it, okay? You'll hurt yourself. We don't need that. We've got to do another one here. That didn't do much. This one will help more. I think that's going to be sufficient.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all for coming out. Bobo Soleil, ladies and gentlemen.
I want to start off by thanking Eric and Bert and Beckett
Yeah.
for continuing this series of readings for Al-Mutanabbi Street every year. I really appreciate it. And this reading today is part of a whole global series of readings for Al-Mutanabbi Street. There's going to be a reading tomorrow in Venice. There's several readings in the UK and all across the United States, from Washington, D.C. to Portland, Oregon to here. And I want to also mention that our project has an exhibit that opens tomorrow at Arian Press here in San Francisco that I hope everybody can get out and see. And we also have a reading at the San Francisco Center for the Book, and that will be on the 11th of March. So a brief introduction to March 5th, 2007. Al-Mutanabbi Street has been a street of booksellers for more than 100 years. People would bring on the weekends books out from their bookstores and sell on tables where everybody would roam about looking at things. And during the American occupation, after the American-led invasion of Iraq, people, for some reason, still felt protected on that street, even though sectarian fighting had started. They still felt that there was some kind of charm that who would attack a street of books. So on March 5th, a car bomber parked his car early in the morning on Al-Mutanabbi Street. And he sat there for almost an hour, and one of the merchants asked him to move the car, and he detonated it, and more than 30 people immediately died. More than 100 people were wounded. Everything was in flames. You know, books strewn everywhere. The car was kind of kitty-cornered from the Shabandar Cafe, which is a literary cafe on Al-Mutanabbi Street. The owner of that cafe lost 4 of his sons, plus a grandson on that day. So I felt here in San Francisco that there had to be some kind of a response. And I asked the arts community to mount some kind of a response. And we did. We had a reading in 2007 at the San Francisco Public Library. And we put out a call for letterpress broadsides as a response. And we immediately got about 43 of them. So we had the reading and we had the broadsides, and then it looked like we were just going to pack things up, and that was that. We had done our response. But I realized that the thing about responses like that is that that's exactly what your government wants you to do, is to do one thing and go home. It's like all the marches that we did against the invasion of Iraq. As long as we went home at the end of it, they were fine with those marches. They already knew they were going to do it anyway. So I wanted a project, I realized, that didn't go away and that began to focus in a literary and artistic way on what had happened, because this was an attack on a cultural street. This was an attempt to erase part of Iraq's culture in one fell swoop, and to send a message that whoever the bombers were, and no one ever took credit for this bombing, that they were being watched, and that not only were the books that were there decimated, but they wanted to send a message that we would watch what you were writing and publishing. Well, the very next day after the bombing, poets and artists in Baghdad came down to the street and stood on the burned out hulks of cars and began a reading, much like this, with people just standing up and pouring out their heart for what that street meant to them. So I decided the way to renew the project was begin to address what had happened through different art forms. So we began with the letterpress broadsides. We ended up with more than 130 broadsides. And they're now part of the permanent collection of the Iraq National Library in Baghdad. Then we began doing a call for people who make artist books, people who fashion by hand one poem, one idea into a book, and they pour their own life into making these. So we called that project an inventory of Al-Mutanabbi Street. And I began working with a woman named Sarah Bodman, who's at UWE in Bristol in the UK. Then we put out a call for printmakers. And we got over 200 printmakers to respond to that bombing. So this was over the course of a number of years. And now the show that is at Arian Press is mostly from a project that we started a few years ago that is called Shadow and Light. And it's a response to the targeted assassinations of Iraqi academics between 2003 and 2012. I stumbled onto a list that had 324 of them, although other accounts have that more than 700 Iraqi academics were targeted and killed. So that's what that project addresses. It's a photography project, but a really important part of that project is the statement of the artist who has taken the photograph. Because a really important part of this project is trying to find, I've never liked the notion of building bridges that gets tossed around a lot, but I'd like the idea of finding a kind of a middle ground between the person you're addressing and your own self, your own landscape. And so the artist statements in Shadow and Light try to create that meeting place in between. The other thing is that, you know, I do not see very much difference between the illegal Bush invasion of Iraq and the illegal Putin invasion of the Ukraine. This project, which now has more than 600 participants from 25 countries, really addresses the idea of the free exchange of ideas and free speech, freedom for journalists. Wherever freedom is under peril, that's where Al-Mutanabbi Street starts. I like to say that wherever someone picks up a book, wherever someone begins to write towards the truth, that's where Al-Mutanabbi Street starts. So that could be as well be this bookstore as a cell in San Quentin. It's wherever that spirit is, that's where Al-Mutanabbi Street starts, and that's what we've refused to give up on. So we have an anthology called Al-Mutanabbi Street Starts Here that Eric has copies here at the store. We continue to do these readings every March 5th in as many places as we can, and we have exhibits of the work. We're going to have a show of the shadow and light work in London, probably in the fall of this year, and we have a show that is going to be going up in New Hampshire at a small museum in New Hampshire. But we always look for engagement. We always look for exhibit goers that we can engage with. We just don't want... I've always said that I regard this project not as an art exhibit, but art in the service of ideas. Because that's what this is about. And I can't think of any stronger group to follow that than poets. That kind of engagement that poets can give to something is something I really honor. And poets were the first ones to come to mind when I began this project. So, I realize that's a long-winded introduction, but that's part of my job. So, I want to read, I want to start off with a poem from the anthology. It's a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye. It's called For Al-Mutanabbi Street. She starts off with a quote. Books and stationery, some still tied in charred bundles, littered the street. A single sentence which mesmerized one mind for hours will not be seen again in that edition, will not be seen tucked into the bookshelf of the friend we will never meet, on the street we will not know. What blows to pieces goes fast. They'll give it names. Successful mission, progress and security. What lingers long, quiet hours reading, in which people were the best they hadn't been yet. Something was coming, something exquisitely new, something hopeful anyone might do, and the paper flicker of turning. And then I want to read two of my own poems for Ukraine. This first one is called In the Ukraine. One doesn't need a news feed in the Ukraine. One can read the news on the body parts strewn about in the rubble of its cities. And one can watch the news in the eyes of their terrified children whose gaze holds all the terror that we cannot bear to read about. This is a poem from yesterday for, it's called Vladimir Putin. If you felt an angel softly stroke your face, If the one who still beats you in your dreams went away, if the only one who loved you was still here, if the clouds came apart and the hidden light filled your empty heart, if God sang the letters of your name so that you could finally feel safe and fall asleep, if you could actually see the blood on your hands, would you stop the killing now and not be so afraid of Russia weeping for what you have done? Attacks on culture are attacks on culture, attacks on people are attacks on people. I mean, this project stands with Ukraine as we do with the Iraqi people who have endured so much for so long. I look forward to hearing what you guys have brought to read. Thank you.
So if we could pretty much just proceed with whoever wants to read next, but Kim, maybe you? Great. And then after that, if you all just kind of, stand up when you're ready to read, take the stage. Thank you, Bo.
You're welcome.
Hey guys. I've been a big fan of this project since it began and have read every one of these I've ever been invited to and was totally delighted when Eric asked me to come by for this. I'm going to be inexcusably rude and probably cut out early because I already had a different reading scheduled, but I'm really happy to be here. And for those who don't know, my name's Kim Shuck, and I was the 7th Poet Laureate of San Francisco. Al-Mutanabbi Street, 2022. Night presses fingers, and we ring like bells before sliding out over the Pacific. I would run with you. I would run too, but you were always faster. We are both known to the reaching water, as some are known to the desert, have learned to write her ambidextrous because here she is sunset. Together, we rewrite the streets of poets and stray cats who may or may not be poets. Together, we choose to write blankets for the displaced, spiced tea to warm hands. Our horses are breaker lace, our weapons, words strung of light tremble. We're different and not different. This time, the poets are all out on the streets, all of them, and I've left my sword at home. Thank you so much.
You're already standing.
I'm already standing.
Too late to sit down.
First of all, I want to thank Bo for his persistence in this cultural project and his stamina in terms of writing poems with a topical bent, with a moral foundation that is so essential. So I'm just going to read something that I again inspired by this day in Bo's project. It's entitled "On a Pyre of Blue Sugar." Death haunts every rhyme. Good day, Mr. Death. and every song, every cascade of crimson nothingness asleep in our marrow are jazzing our bones. Our books are mountains of broken spines, and the blood won't stop to have coffee. Death sets a blistering pace, its shadow on the sidewalk an upside-down guitar spelling tristesse. But death stiffens your drink with a gut-wrenching growl, a discolored beard, a grammatical lapse that feeds the guillotine or torches a bouquet of poppies. Death takes a break, a breath, a breather, then disembowels a poet like a piebald heifer and autopsies a cup of sand. After all, the poet Al-Mutanabbi has been dead 1,000 years, and death wears Beelzebub's bullwhip like a sprig of oleander. I want to say the only other event today that held my attention is the campaign to preserve Chesa Boudin as our DA is started today in Alamo Park. So I would urge people to be as involved as they can in that, because all the press and stuff, it's already a phalanx of misinformation and what have you to displace him. And I think he's very essential to the political health of our community going forward. So, all right, thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you. Thank you, poets. If I can, I'd like to say something about Mutanabbi himself, or Mutanabbi's creative testimony, and a little bit about, the city of Odessa, and then a little bit about cities in general, and the ways that a city has to endure are not the same as the ways that empires and nations endure. And I think this is one of the strange lessons of history, But anyway, so about Mutanabbi, he lived 1,000 years ago, and his poetic corpus, is great, and is in Arabic, and but there is also a large body of like extra poetic kind of like energy around him, and it is still operating in a strange way, even amongst us now. For example, there is a story said to have been composed by Mutanabbi and meant to be just simply part of the spoken tradition thousands of years ago. And according to Idris Shah in one of his books, Mutanabbi stipulated that these things were not to be written down until 1,000 years later. So, I do not know. There's a lot of mystification, but there's also a lot of mystery also. But so according to this, this anecdote is said to be from the mouth of Mutanabbi himself to us now. And it involves just an anecdote. It seems like there was a tyrant named Murcia. And this must have been in Spain at that time, when there was... Spain was a meeting place of many, many different principalities and kingdoms and religions as well. And so there was King Murcia, King Ruderig of, or also Roderick, but Ruderig in the Arabic form, Ruderig of Murcia, who, for some strange reason, became subject to a delusion. The delusion that truth could be spoken to him in literal terms. And he decided, having this delusion in his mind, that truth was something that could be literally understood. The meaning of it could be exactly the same as the sound of it in his ear. He also decided, with the power that a king does have, that he could decree that he be told the truth. Not only that he could decree that he could be told the truth, but he could punish those who did not tell the truth. And so he heard that there was an individual by the name of Omar el-Alawi, a dervish, a Sufi. And he had come to his ear had heard the rumor that this Omar el-Alawi knew the truth. And so King Ruderig decided to have this Omar el-Alawi summoned to him so that he, the king, could be told the truth. And that if he was not told the truth, then he could punish this person who was not telling him the truth. Punish him perhaps with death. And so Omar el-Alawi was summoned. And Omar el-Alawi stood before King Ruderig. And King Ruderig said, Omar, you have been summoned here to tell me the truth. And you understand that if you do not tell me the truth, the penalty is death. And Omar el-Alawi said, yes, I understand this, O king. I understand also that, I would like to ask you this question. Does this court honor the established legal precedent that if someone does tell the truth and it does not inculpate them, that they are allowed to go free? And the king said, oh yes, this court is a legitimate court and we honor all of those precedents. If you tell the truth and if it does not inculpate you in any way, then you will be allowed to go free. Very well, thank you, King Mercia, O king, the king of Mercia. And I therefore will honor you, O king, with not only one truth, but 3 truths. I will tell you 3 truths. And the king, having some kind of suspicion about the ways these dervishes have to speak in circuitous ways, the king said, now these truths that you are to tell me, Omar, they are to be truths that are obvious to me. They are to be truths that the meaning of them is as clear to me as soon as the sound of them hits my ear. They will be obvious to me. And Omar el-Tarragon said, oh yes, these are going to be factual statements, O king. And so the king said, very well, then proceed, Omar. And so Omar began to proceed. He said to him, the first truth is this, O king. I am indeed Omar el-Alawi, the dervish. I come from Tarragonia. And the second truth is this. I will be set free as long as I tell the truth and it does not inculpate me. So there are 2 truths already. I am Omar. I will be set free if I follow the procedures of the court. And the third truth is this. You want to be told the truth in the way that you conceive of it. And he said no more. And such was the inspirational energy of these 3 things that Omar said that Ruderig was compelled to give him his freedom. So the Lord moves in mysterious ways, you might say. And so that comes from the consciousness of Mutanabbi via me to you now. And at the same time, though, it came to my consciousness through the pages of a book. And so this mysterious transformation, still exists. And there's nothing that literal thinking can do to stop that process. Anyway, so now, there is a poet by the name of, and perhaps you've heard of him, he's quite well known, Ilya Kaminsky. Ilya Kaminsky is from the hometown of Pushkin, the place where Ovid was exiled to. He is from Odessa, that city on the Black Sea. And he's got a lot of good books out. He wrote a book several years ago called Musica Humana. And I would like to read just a little part of it, a few little parts of it, just to give you a flavor of not only the nature of this kind of poetry that is, eternally valid, but also a little bit about the inner consciousness of the city and how it will endure and continue to inspire, sensitive human beings. Anyway, so this is from Ilya Kaminsky from the book Musica Humana, and this is a little bit about Odessa, and here are his words. In the beginning was the sea. We heard the surf in our breathing, certain that we carried seawater in our veins. A city famous for its drunk tailors, huge gravestones of rabbis, horse owners and horse thieves, and most of all, for its stuffed and baked fish. In Odessa, language always involves gestures. It was impossible to ask someone for directions if their hands were busy. I did ask once. A man was holding 2 huge watermelons, one in each arm. He tried to explain, calmly enough, but as I asked more questions, his face grew red and, one watermelon fell to the ground as he attempted to gesticulate his way through the conversation. He was not disappointed. A man of 60, staring at the juicy watermelon meat right there on the sidewalk. He laughed like the most serious child I ever knew. So, and then the poem continues. Time, my twin, take me by hand through the streets of your city. My days, your pigeons, are fighting for crumbs. This is how we live on earth, a flock of sparrows. The darkness, a magician, finds quarters behind our ears. We don't know what life is, who makes it. The reality is thick with longing. We put it to our lips and drink. I open the windows of an apartment and shout, I had masters once. They roared above me. Who are we? Why are we here? A lantern they carried still glitters in my sleep. In this dream, my father breathes as if lighting a lamp over and over. The memory is starting its old engine. It begins to move, and I think the trees are moving. On the page's soiled corners, my teacher walks, composing a voice. He rubs each word in his palms. Hands learn from the soil and broken glass. You cannot think a poem, he says. Watch the light hardening into words. I want to read just that little part again. On the page's soiled corners. On the page's soiled corners, my teacher walks, composing a voice. He rubs each word in his palms. Hands learn from the soil and broken glass. You cannot think a poem, he says. Watch the light hardening into words. See, something's going on there in the eternal book, is it not? And yet the eternal book has its manifestation on earth. Thousands of them. They are surrounding us on the shelves even now. Anyway, the poem continues. I was born in the city named after Odysseus. Odessa is named after Odysseus. I was born in the city named after Odysseus, and I praise no nation. To the rhythm of snow, an immigrant's clumsy phrases fall into speech. But you asked for a story with a happy ending. Your loneliness played its lyre. I sat on the floor watching your lips. Love, a one-legged bird I bought for 40 cents as a child and released, is coming back, my soul in reckless feathers. Oh, the language of birds. With no word for complaint. The balconies, the wind. This is how, while darkness drew my profile with its little finger, I have learned to see past as Montale saw it, the obscure thoughts of God descending among a child's drum beats, over you, over me, over the lemon trees. And so the poem begins with an inscription from Montale, the Italian poet, about the lemon trees shining, pouring like a golden horn the songs into the human breast of longing, you see. And so the poem is made up of many echoes, and it's a wonderful poem, a wonderful book, and a wonderful poet from a wonderful city, which will continue to inspire us no matter what it has always done. It's been continually inhabited since not later than the 6th century BC. So that's a lot of consciousness there. Anyway, so at last, here's a poem from Rilke about cities. It is a fragment of the Arduino Elegies. Rilke tells us, "Now shall I praise the cities, those long surviving, great constellations of earth, for only in praising is my heart still mine, so violently do I know the world. And even my lament turns into a paean before my disconsolate heart. Let no one say that I don't love life, the eternal presence. I pulsate in her, she bears me, she gives me the spaciousness of this primeval workday for me to make use of. And over my existence flings in her magnanimity nights that have never been. Her strong hand is above me, and should she hold me under, submerged in fate, I would have to learn how to breathe down there. Even her most lightly entrusted mission would fill me with songs of her, although I suspect that all she wants is for me to be as vibrant as she is. Once poets resounded over the battlefield, what voice can outshout the rattle of this metallic age that is struggling on toward its careening future? And indeed, it hardly requires the call. Its own battle din roars into song. Let one whose soul is no longer startled by palaces, by gardens' boldness, by the rising and falling of ancient fountains, or by the infinite there-ness of statues. Let such a one go out into his or her daily life, where greatness is lying in ambush, and someday, at some turn, will leap upon you and force you to fight for your life. So in this clashing of opposites, there is still that which within us is great and true. And so all of this is a testimony to that. And it will continue to do its work in this world and in all others. So it is in that hope that I thank you. And hooray for Mutanabbi.
Do we have anyone else to read? Then I think
No?
that
Is it a poem we should hear?
so now.
Maybe Michael would read that poem that you are unsure of reading.
No, the translation isn't working.
Oh.
Yeah, so.
Oh, okay.
The standards are too high.
Okay, is there
But it's
anything
been great.
you want us to read out of the anthology, or shall we call it a reading?
Oh yeah, there is this Baghdad anthology.
Well, I'm thinking the Mutanabbi Street one,
Yeah.
because it'd be easier to focus on.
Sure, you can read
Anything you
something.
particularly want to hear from it?
Yeah, there's a prose poem by Richard Harrison, a Canadian. You know, the meaning of Al-Mutanabbi in Arabic is the one who thinks he is a prophet,
I did not know that.
which
Wow.
I always thought was a great name for a poem.
And it also means great.
We're all poets.
Mutakabir.
Would you do the reading of it?
No, I'd like somebody else to read.
All right. Michael, would you? I get quite quavery when I try to read.
So do I.
Yeah, but you're used to it. You're a pro at quavering. Richard Harrison, huh?
Yeah.
Does it have an index of writers? Or
Yeah, there is an
I didn't
at the very
see-
beginning.
Oh, I missed it. Okay.
He's towards the end of the book.
Okay. Why don't you find it for me?
Okay, I'm going to give it to Everett.
Okay. Pass that buck.
Passing the buck.
Here, you threw that out and said, read Richard Harrison.
Richard Harrison.
Then we have to find it. There he is, a home on Al-Mutanabbi Street 161.
In case you're in suspense in the rest of the world, we're seeking a
Yeah,
poem,
the prose
which
piece.
Michael Koch will read to you. So.
Okay, so this is a prose poem by Richard Harrison, A Home on Al-Mutanabbi Street. I am a word. I am a word in Arabic, in English, and in Farsi. I am a word in Kurdish and German and Hebrew and French. I am a word in the mouths of prophets and hawkers. I will get you tea. I will bring you joy and to tears. I am a word in a book. I lie open to the sun that reads me over the shoulder of someone looking to buy. I am the imagination of the enemy come home to its enemy's understanding, because the leap from enemy to friend is as swift and sure as the journey from paper to eye. I am loved. I am reviled. I am feared. I am myself, and I am you. When the book opens, you can hear me sigh in pleasure at the touch of your mind. When the bombs go off, I am scattered from all that I have known, and the wind and ashes take me. You might think I disappear, but I do not. The fires die down. My place in the house, on the street, in the rebuilt cafes remains. I am memory and the stuff of memory. I survive the past because I am always the present. I survive death because I am the future. I survive hatred because I am love. Build me a home and I will return and be heard. And when you see me filling the page again, you will know I never abandoned you. Wow, a beautiful, beautiful poem. Fitting conclusion. Oh my goodness.
Amazing reading.
Wow.
Say again the name of the author?
Richard Harrison.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is he a local fellow?
He's a Canadian poet.
And he was he one of the equivalent of the poet laureate in Canada?
Yeah, he won the Governor General's Award
So,
a couple of years ago in Canada.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's our
Thank you,
reading.
Art.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Bo, thank you for making all this happen. But our
Thank you for
sympathy to the people of the
For
world
every
that
year,
always
every year.
suffer. Every year.
You're here for us too every year.
Good. Well, so Bo is a bookseller. Once a bookseller, always. So
Yeah.
I think he maybe doesn't have to toil in a shop at present, but you never know what the future holds. And
Come look in our basement.
there you go. So anyway, we're pleased to present this. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for reading.
Yeah. You know, I just want to ask you something about, you're going to this